This is Right to Life Radio. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
SB 1196 is dead. We've got a large statement from Pope Francis talking about, is it all about transgender surgeries or is it about something else? Actually, no, it's about other stuff. It's about abortion. It's about all kinds of aspects of human dignity. We're going to dig into all this exciting stuff. We're going to have a Donald Trump comments on abortion free show this week, Mr. Jonathan Keller from California Family Council.
All right, if you say so.
Yeah, we talked about Trump and his views on abortion, I think, the last 2 weeks, and I think we've kind of beaten that horse to death. So we'll move on from there. If you want legal commentary on Donald Trump's trial in Manhattan, you can check out the podcast feed for the John Girardi Show, where I'm breaking down all that. So that
I would like to hear that.
It's been a fun. It's been an interesting week.
I will say it is funny. It is funny. I did see, John, some commentary online where people were commenting on the fact that Trump is very indignant, and many of his supporters are very indignant over the fact that he will not be allowed to attend Barron's graduation because
that is kind of crummy.
It is kind of crummy, but someone pointed out, which I thought was a decent thing. They said normal people finding out how the criminal justice system works and getting very angry about it is interesting to watch, which is somewhat fair.
Yeah, I would make an argument that the charges in New York are totally bogus. But yes. Anyway, that is a topic for the John Girardi Show. All right. Now, in the midst of all the commentary that Trump was making about the abortion issue, actually, literally, I think, released the same day that Donald Trump released his big statement on his sort of new position on abortion, sort of, here we said this was going to be a Donald Trump free episode. We're 2 minutes in. All we've talked about is Donald Trump. Literally that same day, Pope Francis released a document through the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith at the Vatican, which is basically like the office that helps the Pope out with teaching about doctrinal issues.
See, John, you said that in a vaguely English-British accent.
Because I realize how preposterous it probably sounds to most evangelical Christians listening that we have a whole department at the Vatican dedicated to this with a very long name with lots of syllables.
Well, I mean, you sort of have that to a certain degree. If any single Protestant denomination had the size and scope and history of the Catholic Church, I mean, you do have some pretty long-sounding things in the Southern Baptist Convention.
Okay, but this is a funny story. When Bishop Brennan came to consecrate, they built this new big church in Visalia. There's a new big, very large Catholic church in Visalia. And Bishop Brennan came to do it, and there's another church nearby, right next door, that very graciously offered to let the Catholics use their parking lot for the dedication ceremony, which was very kind of them. But apparently I heard through the grapevine from a priest the story that they're like, well, we got to let them have the parking lot. I mean, the Pope's going to show up. No, the Pope did not come to Visalia, California.
Oh, so, that's funny.
Yeah, along with Bishop Brennan came to my dad's funeral.
Yeah,
and my son, who's 5, had the quote of the day in which he saw Bishop Brennan, and he was wearing his purple sort of bishop hat. It's the hat the bishop, basically he was wearing the outfit he wears when he's at a mass, but he's not celebrating mass. So he's wearing this purple hat. And my 5-year-old son said, "Mama, the Pope is here, and he is wearing a party hat." So I told Bishop Brennan that, and he thought that was hilarious.
All right, good.
All right, so let's get into this. Pope Francis ordered published this document that was talking about the concept of human dignity.
Yes.
And appropriately, its name, all documents that the church releases have a Latin title, and the Latin title is basically the first 2 or 3 words of the document itself. This document is therefore called Dignitas Infinita, infinite dignity, which was, I guess, the first words of the document in Latin. Which is
a pretty cool title, I will say.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. It's a little ham-fisted,
Infinite
I think. But
dignity.
As a Latinist myself, it's a little ham-fisted. But that's all right. That's all right. We'll just move on. And I think it is really good. So basically, the thing about this that caught the most headlines, and in America, in American religious and American pro-life circles, these headlines got a little muted because of Donald Trump's comments. But the thing from this document that caught the most headlines was it's one of the first times for the Catholic Church, and I think probably one of the first times for any Christian body in a corporate way. I don't know. I in fairness, I am not as familiar with what, I don't know, the Southern Baptists are doing or people like that. It's one of the first kind of comprehensive statements by a Christian community going in detail into why transgenderism and sex change operations are immoral, and specifically condemning them as being contrary to the Christian faith. So it's a very significant document like that in that sense, but it talks about a lot of other topics, and it has a lot of space and attention devoted to abortion, assisted suicide, and euthanasia directly. But it also really develops some important points about the concept of human dignity. And I thought it would be interesting to share about it with all of you, because I think it's actually really good. And I think it's a lot of sort of liberals within the Catholic Church and outside who all have this sense of Pope Francis as an enormous flaming lefty who supports everything they say and do, have been actually extremely angry and disappointed by all of this, which they would not have been had they actually been reading things Pope Francis has said with a little bit more care and attention, like I have.
You will appreciate this, John. I don't know if you saw my clever, witty comment on regarding this new document on our little Signal chat group. I said to someone said, "Hey, anyone know about this? Is this good? You haven't read it yet."
Good,
and my response was, "Well, I saw it gave James Martin the sads, so it must be good."
Yeah, Father James Martin, who is a reliable source of lefty Catholic commentary.
Yes.
Now, basically the way this document is structured, and for those of you who are interested in it, I would say this isn't too, like, I would say that someone who was not Catholic could read this and derive benefit from it. I think there's a lot in it that's really good and really interesting, and a lot of shared common ground, a lot of wisdom that a lot of people could share in a unified way. I don't know that there's too much that's too rigidly Catholic specific about it. I don't know. Maybe there's a bit more of a, for different Protestant traditions that have a view of sort of total depravity of human nature. Maybe there might be some quibbling with some of that. But I think that there's a lot there, even with that caveat. I think there's a lot there that is would be appealing to people on both sides of the Christian street.
And so let me say one thing on that, John, because I think as the token Protestant in the discussion, it's interesting because I think sometimes there are Protestants who can be a little bit skittish or a little bit nervous when they're seeing documents like this that come out, and they go, "Well, I don't know. I mean, can we read this? Is this okay? Like, is this like what? Like,
I promise that you will not burst into flames or start attending Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal Parish in Delano."
Yes, exactly. Well, but it's interesting because I saw a guy on Twitter, a conservative. I think he's Presbyterian. He's either Presbyterian or Baptist, but he listed this list of his favorite theologians. He's either throughout history. I think it was throughout history, and he goes, "These are my top 10, favorite theologians that I enjoy reading." And he's, of course, so he had Luther on there, he had Calvin on there,
sure.
But number 10 on the list was Joseph Ratzinger.
Hey, there you go.
And one of the Protestant followers said, "Why in the world do you have Joseph Ratzinger on there?" And he said, "Have you ever read any Joseph Ratzinger?"
Yeah, he's a pretty smart guy.
For those of you who don't know, that was Pope Benedict the 16th.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
the idea behind it is that even like hardcore Reformed Baptist or Presbyterian people can look at a lot of Catholic writing and theology and go, "Wow, there's a lot of very profound, beautiful truth in these documents."
And vice versa, I would say.
Yeah.
If I'm being gracious, I will say, and vice versa. So
I would say if you're a Protestant person and you're kind of approaching this going, "Well, why are we talking about this?" It's like, just hold your horses.
Well, and I just think for global Christianity, to actually address these issues, I think is pretty important. I think it's significant when the Pope does it, and I think it's significant kind of for Christianity globally. So
absolutely.
Anyway, so the way the document's broken up, it kind of has two halves to it. the first half of it is talking about the concept of dignity, what it is, how it is something that there are different kinds of dignity, but that it is at root, sort of its most important expression is that it is ontological, meaning that it applies to your being, your nature as such. And one of the sort of most important things, I think, is it cites some of the scholastic philosophers, Boethius, St. Bonaventure, St. Thomas Aquinas, who define a person as an individual substance of a rational nature. And one of the points it makes is you are a person when you're an individual substance, one individual substance, of a rational nature. Human nature is rational. You're an individual substance of it. You're a human person, okay? As am I, as am anyone. And why that's an important definition, that classical definition of a person, why it's important. Well, much of what is happening with modern day efforts to kill people who aren't deemed important at either the beginning of life, unborn children, or at the end of life, the elderly and the senile elderly, people with lessened mental capacity, is to say, well, they lack human capacities. Therefore, their lives are not as important. Unborn children can't think for themselves. They can't envision their own futures. This is the classic Peter Singer argument that if you're a being who cannot envision your own future sense of yourself, your own future goals and achievements, then you lack value. And that's why Peter Singer he's able to argue that he thinks there are certain kinds of animals that are people, but not newborn babies. Okay. And he thinks people should be able to commit infanticide if they don't want to have a baby, along with abortion, completely unrestricted abortion. What's important, though, is that you're an individual substance of a rational nature. That human nature itself is a rational nature. So even if you, by virtue of you're underdeveloped, so you can't express your rational faculties, or you have some physical handicap like Down syndrome or a brain injury or something like that, or Alzheimer's, your nature is still rational. You're still an individual substance of a rational nature. And why is that important? Well, it then gives value to people regardless of their strengths. It gives value to people regardless of how strong you are, how capable you are, how smart you are, how mentally developed you are, even if you're weak, even if you're underdeveloped, even if you lack standing in society, even whatever the case is, we all share this rational nature, and that's what a person is. It's an individual substance of this rational nature. So with that grounding, that sort of highlights the wrongness of this, sort of gives us, with that sort of understanding of what a person is. Because that's often the debate you find yourself in with pro-choicers. Well, when does a human being become a human person? Human person. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you purely boil it down to your capacities, then it's obviously going to just purely be on a spectrum where you're going to have to draw some artificial line, and someone's on one side of the line and someone's on the other side of the line. And where the strong can dominate the weak. And
very often, John, the thing that I've heard this usually described as, depending on where you decide you're going to draw that line, you either, if you are under-inclusive, then you clearly exclude entire groups of humans who are human. Yeah. Because if it's based on, cognitive ability or
babies
skills or whatever, people that are in comas or whatever. Or if you are overly inclusive, then you end up including a bunch of, higher animals, primates or dolphins or octopuses or, whatever it is.
Pigs. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that sort of grounding in the first half of the document. So it's sort of in the first half of the document, it gives this sort of philosophical grounding for what is a person. And how do people, what is dignity? How does that attach to a person? That's all in the first half of it. When we return, we'll talk about sort of the second half of the document and the individual kinds of offenses against dignity that it lists out and discuss, and particularly the importance of the body. We'll talk about that next. This is Right to Life Radio. John Girardi and Jonathan Keller here on Power Talk. Right to Life Radio, back with you, Jonathan Keller and John Girardi. We're talking about in the whole hubbub and hullabaloo over Donald Trump's comments about abortion. We missed that Pope Francis released a really excellent document about human dignity that has, I think, huge impacts on the abortion issue. He sort of talked about the issue of abortion at some length, and I want to dig into this. So basically, as Jonathan and I were describing, the first half of it, this document that the Pope issued, and it was about 11,000 words. Okay. The first half of it was talking about the concept of human dignity, and the second half talks about different individual violations of human dignity. And one of the things it talked about at length was transgenderism, transgender surgeries, and things like that. And one of the things it talked about in that regard was the body. And so we learned in sort of the first half of this show and of that document, someone is defined to be a person by being an individual substance of a rational nature. Okay, so I am an individual substance. I am part of the human species. I have a rational nature. My nature is rational. And that will stay true of me even if I have a brain injury and I can't really think anymore. Okay, I'm still an individual substance of a rational nature. My nature might be hindered by some physical impairment or something, but that doesn't affect the core of who I am and my nature, all right? So with that in mind, there's a lot of discussion about the body. And the body being a part of human nature. And from talking about this in a Christian perspective, that if the body's not just a sort of an add-on, it's something that's constitutively part of human nature, and that it's part of participating in the image of God.
Your body is not, and John, I saw this quote pop up again today at one point, and I think I, in my younger days of ignorance, might have actually reshared this quote at one point.
Yeah, the terrible quote. The terrible quote that that's always attributed to C.S. Lewis, but which he obviously did not say.
Right.
Which, I mean, you can read it off.
You are not a body. You are a soul. You have a body. And
which I feel like is almost totally bleep backwards from my perspective. You are both the soul and a body.
Right.
That
they
is
are connected.
Yeah, I mean, to say if you say that, what you actually, I mean, that was kind of Manichaeanism.
Right.
Was this very harshly dualist kind of Christian heresy in the 4th century that St. Augustine briefly was a Manichae, and then he left Manichaeanism, became a Christian, and then he spent the rest of his time as a Christian theologian talking about how much Manichaeanism sucked. And the idea of Manichaeanism was, well, you're just a soul. The body is just sort of this useless appendage. So it was also a kind of convenient doctrine because it meant, hey, if you want to have some fun with your body, like, by sleeping around and stuff, it wasn't a big deal. No, the body is really important. It's the body, even if you go really in depth with classical sort of Catholic and Aristotelian notions, the soul is the thing that gives your body animation, gives your body life.
Right.
And so you are a body that is animated by a soul. So basically the contention it makes is that the body actually participates in when Genesis says that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. Well, what is a human being? A human being is something that has a body and a soul. The body participates in being part of this image of God, and that it is a kind of given that has to be respected. So this leads to, later in the document, sort of these specific condemnations of transgenderism, gender theory, and sex change operations that I think were really, which I think made a lot of sense. But I think it does apply also in the context of, say, for example, surrogacy. So I think this was maybe, as much as this document was kind of a groundbreaking thing for talking about sex change and transgenderism really in depth, I think one of the first kind of very detailed Christian forays into this by a whole Christian denomination. Its very specific condemnation of surrogacy, I think, was something really important, and basically talking about the idea of looking at human beings as not as basically that human beings have to be treated as ends and goods in and of themselves, not as means. We cannot instrumentalize the human body for the attainment of our own, someone else who's more powerful, their gratification, their desires.
Okay, so John, you just said a lot of big philosophizing words there.
Yeah, there you go.
So, and we've talked about this, I think, a little bit in the past, and I know our organization, California Family Council, did a webinar talking about this from not just the surrogacy angle, but the IVF angle a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
But
I'm honestly surprised there wasn't more of an IVF treatment in this document, especially given that if they're going to talk about surrogacy, you can really almost not have surrogacy without IVF. But almost definitional. Well,
yeah,
I guess you
theoretically could,
but no,
that raises a whole host of other issues.
That's also bad. Yeah.
But I think, John, to like put this in layman's terms, children and babies and family, children are not. I think we've used it in the past. They're not ornaments that you hang on the Christmas tree of your life. You don't just say, oh, well, I've got this great thing that I want. I want to have my life. I want to have this nice.
Have a boy, have a girl, have 2.5 kids, white picket fence. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And the document itself, how it characterizes it. The church also takes a stand against the practice of surrogacy. The practice of surrogacy violates the dignity of the child. Every child possesses an intangible dignity that is clearly expressed, albeit in a unique and differentiated way, at every stage of his or her life, from the moment of conception, at birth, growing up. Because of this inalienable dignity, the child has the right to a fully human and not artificially induced origin, and to receive the gift of life that manifests both the dignity of the giver and that of the receiver. So anyway, very good section. We got to get into a break here. When we return, we'll talk about more stuff with this. We'll also talk about the defeat of SB 1196, the assisted suicide bill in California. All of that is next on Right to Life Radio. We're back with Right to Life Radio. We've been talking about Pope Francis's document on human dignity that he had published on April 8th, Dignitas Infinita. One of the things he discussed at length was physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia, and we have a couple of things to say about it, but it serves as our entree into discussing an actual good thing that happened in Sacramento, Jonathan.
Yes.
It's very rare for good things to happen. Although, one good thing that's going to happen in Sacramento this upcoming Sunday and Monday is California Family Council first having a big event on Sunday evening in Sacramento. Jonathan, you can give the deets.
Sure.
And then the California March for Life on Monday, the 22nd.
So if you are listening to this on Saturday morning, just happen to be driving around in your car and you're like, I was thinking of heading to Sacramento this weekend.
I like these guys.
Yeah. So Sunday night, we actually do still have a handful of tickets left. If you would like to come up to the gala, the dinner, the Defending Life dinner that we are doing, we have a small but mighty contingent of folks from Fresno that are going to be up there. And we're going to hear from Dr. Christina Francis, the president of APLOG. We're going to hear from Felicia Preisnor, who's the vice president at the March for Life. And we're going to talk all about the future of the pro-life movement in a post-Roe America. We're going to talk about why... Excuse me.
There you go.
We're going to talk about why it is so important to fight this issue on both a federal and state level. We won't mention any politicians that talk about that, but we will be responding to some of those.
There we go. Very good.
So, come to that. But then the next day, John, is the day after, Monday, the 22nd.
Is the California March for Life. Yeah. If you're in Fresno and you want to go, we may have sold out all the tickets by the time you're listening to this. However, if you want to show up at the parking lot of Holy Spirit Catholic Church at about 6 a.m. And hang out there, and we have an extra seat, you can join up.
Come on.
Yeah, so we'll be taking a bus from Fresno for the California March for Life. We're very excited, and we'll be taking a bunch of kids from SJM and Fresno State Students for Life, so we're really excited about all that. All right. Now, Mr. Jonathan.
Yes.
Let's talk about SB 1196. You heard Jonathan and me talk about this bill for several episodes throughout really the course of March, I'm pretty sure. We had guests on talking about it. Well, the good news is that SB 1196, which was a terrible piece of legislation, which would have wildly expanded the eligibility criteria for assisted suicide in California. It would have allowed for actual euthanasia. It would have allowed out-of-state people to come to California to kill themselves, and I think it would have probably transformed California into the world's capital for euthanasia and assisted suicide. The only mercy killing I like is when pro-euthanasia bills are defeated.
Yes.
So this bill was mercifully defeated, withdrawn by its author. So Jonathan, why don't you explain to us sort of what happened here? What were the dynamics here, and why did this bill go down? I mean, it's a liberal proposed and liberal backed bill. You'd think that wouldn't have any trouble in the California legislature. So what happened here, Jonathan?
Yeah, so John, as you've mentioned, this bill was by a brand new legislator, I think named Blake Spear, and legislator Assemblymember Blake Spear, I believe, maybe got out a little bit over her skis on this, and was
Catherine Blake Spear.
She was
new California state senator.
Yeah. So she'd introduced this bill. It was a little bit, I think, more aggressive than even some of the people in the pro assisted suicide, the pro what they call MAID, MAID, medical assistance in dying. Mm-hmm. Even those people in the MAID industry looked at this and said, "Okay, this is
a bit much."
Yes, and it may end up with some backlash. So there was a great article, John, kind of writing in response to this from Politico, of all places. And just a couple days ago, lawmaker withdraws sweeping California bill to expand assisted dying. And then essentially, San Diego area Senator Catherine Blake Spear confirmed after Politico first reported that she removed her proposal, Senate Bill 1196, from consideration before its first hearing. At this point, there is reluctance from many around me to take up this discussion, and the future is unclear, Blake Spear said in a statement. Mm-hmm. The topic, however, remains of great interest to me and to those who have supported this bill thus far. So
seems like she's kind of CYA. So
yes,
significantly, Compassion and Choices, which is the main entity that supported the legalization of assisted suicide in California back in 2015.
Right.
They actually opposed this bill. And they gave some of their reasons for it. They thought the criteria were actually a little too large. And the criteria were way too large. I mean, well, I think any criteria to allow people to kill themselves is a little too large. But basically, what this bill would have done is basically import Canada's legal standard for allowing people to kill themselves into California law. Would have allowed basically, it looks like it would have allowed anyone with a disability to kill themselves.
Essentially.
Because it was any grievous and irremediable medical condition. Anyone with that kind of a medical condition would be eligible for physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia.
Right.
And also, I think legalizing euthanasia rather than assisted suicide, that brings in a new element. And it gives me, just coincidentally, gives me some opportunity to talk about what Pope Francis was teaching through this document, Dignitas Infinita, that the Vatican released earlier this month, where it actually spends a good bit of time talking about euthanasia and assisted suicide. And it had a couple of really, I think, good things to say. One of the things, so it begins with this. the document says, there's a special case of human dignity violation that is quieter, but is swiftly gaining ground. It is unique in how it, and this, I think this was really insightful. It is unique in how it utilizes a mistaken understanding of human dignity to turn the concept of dignity against life itself. This confusion is particularly evident today in discussions surrounding euthanasia. For example, laws permitting euthanasia or assisted suicide are sometimes called death with dignity acts. It has that in quotes, death with dignity acts. And that's true. That's
Exactly what they say.
Exactly what they call it, death with dignity. Dignity is always being used. With this, there's a widespread notion that euthanasia or assisted suicide is somehow consistent with respect for the dignity of the human person. However, in response to this, it must be strongly reiterated, and I'll say this was actually, for those of you who listen to the show pretty closely, you'll know my dad passed away about a month ago. And this sentence really kind of hit home for me, having been with him towards the end. However, in response to this, it must be strongly reiterated that suffering does not cause the sick to lose their dignity, which is intrinsically and inalienably their own. So it's this thing that this document that Pope Francis issued sort of talked about throughout. Human dignity is grounded in the nature of what is a person, an individual substance of a rational nature. Our rational nature is what grounds this ontological dignity, this dignity that resides in who we are as human beings.
Right.
So the mere fact of suffering does not remove that dignity. There are other kinds of dignity that maybe you could say that it harms or violates, but that is ending someone's life in response to suffering is not actually respecting that inherent dignity that they have as rational beings.
And John, so to clarify that, or just to expand on that, I think there is a appetite, there is a desire, even when you talk about these groups, the fact that it would be very easy in the case of someone like Peter Singer or other people like that, if you say, mankind is just, another animal, mankind is just a...
you and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals.
Yes.
All right, so I'll stop there. All right.
Exactly. If that's the case, then you can just say, come on, we euthanize dogs.
You put down dogs when
we
they're
euthanize cats. It is the smart thing to do. We should do it because of cost overruns and everything like that. But nobody talks about it like that. Even if in the back of their mind they might think it a little bit, everybody realizes that
there's something different about a human being.
And at minimum, even those people, like, look at the Hemlock Society. They were originally called the Hemlock Society.
But
hey, kill yourself.
Before those organizations focused on, like, autonomy and became, compassion and choices. Yeah, they were calling themselves the Hemlock Society, and we're not exactly getting a lot of traction.
And it wasn't...
As producer Colton was learning, producer Colton, the youngest person in the room, just learned about Jack Kevorkian, like about 2 weeks ago.
And
this guy was out here killing people. He was.
And I don't remember what your exact line was, but it was something, like, man, that guy was a creep, or that guy was really evil. And I was like, he was.
Yeah, he was.
And the reason why he was in some ways...
Colton, this guy, O.J. Simpson, he was also...
That's right. The reason why...
We're just being mean to Colton because he makes us feel old.
I know. But the idea that...
With his AI-generated music. And anyway.
The idea that you had... Originally, I think the advocates of this realized that they had to, at minimum, pay lip service to the idea of death with dignity. It wasn't just, nope, I think that people should be allowed to kill themselves, and I'm Dr. Death, I'm Dr. Kevorkian.
Yeah.
And there was an attempt to kind of co-opt the idea and say, well, look, I think that this person deserves a dignified death because, like you were saying, isn't it undignified to suffer towards the end of your life?
Well, and that's one of the things the document talks about, is that there are different kind of categories and concepts of dignity that can all kind of exist together. But this fundamental and ontological dignity that humans possess has to be sort of respected at all times. Now, when we return, we will talk more about all of these different topics, and we will be thinking about what's going on coming up with the California March for Life, all kinds of different stuff. Will there be more assisted suicide legislation coming forward in California? That is next on Right to Life Radio. Back with Right to Life Radio, we've got California March for Life coming up this Monday. We've got all kinds of stuff we're doing here at Right to Life Central California. Jonathan, we've done this academic year through Right to Life of Central California. We have done presentations for over 4,200 kids in the greater San Joaquin Valley area. So we are rocking and rolling here at Right to Life of Central California. And for those of you who might be interested, we also got our Right to Life Central California golf tournament coming up on Monday, April 29th. I don't know if we can fit too many more golfers, but if you want to come to the dinner afterwards, tickets are $20 a pop. We'd love to have you. If you'd like to just donate, you could also do that, rtlcc.org or righttolifeca.org if you want to learn more about that. All right, Jonathan, as we are wrapping up the show, I want to ask you what you think, Jonathan, about this bill, SB 1196, on physician-assisted suicide, expanding eligibility for physician-assisted suicide, legalizing euthanasia, allowing people from outside of California to come to kill themselves, opening up youth-assisted suicide to people without life-threatening illnesses. This bill just got defeated, but this bill just got defeated in the California state legislature, pulled by the author.
Right.
Is this the last we've heard of this kind of a thing, though?
I doubt it. And to go back to that article real quick on Politico, it says the proposal faced opposition from all sides, even from lobbying groups and legislators that have pushed for similar laws in the past. Compassion and Choices, a national group that lobbies for end-of-life options, was against it from the start for straying from the 6-month standard of care for terminal patients and for including dementia. So I think that is positive, but this is what Tim Rosales, who's a friend of mine and a spokesperson for Patients' Rights Action Fund, said it's clearly an overreach. This is probably they had probably not done their due diligence on this issue. So I think that there is a
they're just not educated enough on assisted suicide. It's not that they realize it's killing people.
Yeah, I think in Tim's case, he's a good guy. He's on our side on this, but I think it's something where they know, John, there's going to be this confluence of factors where as people live longer and healthcare costs keep going up, there is going to be both a dignity, autonomy push for this, and there is going to be a cost-cutting push for this.
Yeah, well, and I'm seeing a big piece in The Economist talking about how they want to push for assisted suicide in the UK. It's already been adopted in Canada. I think, and as you say, you have commentators now talking very openly about, as we move to more and more government-controlled healthcare systems, like there just aren't enough medical resources in the country for everyone to have Cadillac quality care. You got to have some people got to have a Honda Civic, and if you have a Honda Civic, that means you're not getting certain kinds of treatments. And guess what's cheaper than chemotherapy? Guess what's cheaper than dialysis? It's killing people.
Yep.
And so I agree with you. I think there are some big societal and fiscal forces that are going to push, and probably they'll push, if they're going to push anyone, they'll push California before they will the rest of the country.
Right.
It's going to push California in the direction of more and broader assisted suicide and euthanasia. That'll do it for Right to Life Radio. We will see you next time right here on Power Talk.